Hello, and thank you for stopping by. Today, I'm going to show you how I changed the CV axle on this 2006 Saturn Vue. Normally, I would show you the tools I use before I start, but this is the first time I'm changing one on the Saturn. Not sure what tools I'll need, but I will show you the tools as I use them and their sizes. If you were fortunate enough that you never had to change a flat on your Saturn, these plastic caps come off by screwing them off. Once you screw them off, the lug nuts are behind there. Before I raise the vehicle up, I'm going to loosen the lug nuts and loosen the axle nut that's behind here. Now you might ask, how do you know when you have to change your CV axle? Well, let's go take a listen. That's how you know you have to replace that CV axle. As a matter of fact, this is well past the time that should have been changed. Now, let's get to it. This is what we have done so far. This is the hubcap. And I mentioned earlier that these plastic lug nuts turn and this whole unit comes off. Don't try to pop them out. You'll crack this and have to buy a new one. You can use a lug wrench on this. If you have, this is just a Harbor Freight impact wrench. Works fine for me. But if you have the lug wrench, you could use that. If you have the impact wrench, this takes a 19mm socket. And this axle bolt takes, let's see, 34mm socket. This takes a 34mm socket, this bolt. Now, I don't own the socket here. And I went to, what was on Advance Auto, and this is one of those where they lease you the tools. You give them a deposit. If you don't bring it back, you bought it. If you bring it back, you get your money back. Just pointing that out. Now I'm going to jack the car up, pull this wheel off, I'm going to pull this nut out a little bit more, and then I'm going to tap it in with the nut on it, not to flare these threads, to get the axle out. When I have that done, I'll be back. Okay, I have the wheel off, but before I start on that, I just want to give you a couple of tips here. This driveway is pretty packed down, but it is wet. It's been wet out here for a couple of months. I have this jack on a 2x12, so as the jack is going up and it has to roll a little bit, it's not slipping off the vehicle, it can roll. After I had it jacked up, put a jack stand underneath, lowered the jack to the weight being on the stand, and the jack here just as an extra support. And I didn't come to the edge because these cars are pretty rusty on the edge. I went to the frame. That's something, if you have an older vehicle, you might want to look at that, because if this is rusted out enough and you jack it up, it will go up and you'll see a big dent in there. Now back to the wheel. I had to change the wheel bearing on this a while back. Normally you would spin this nut out, maybe make it a little proud, tap it with a hammer to get this axle loose. But when I did the wheel bearing, I made sure I had anti-seize on that bearing, and look at this. I didn't hit it, just with my thumb. It goes in and out. You can see it moving. Now I'm not sure which way to attack this. I have to take this wheel off anyway. I'm thinking with the brake caliper off and the wheel off, I might be able to turn this. I have to see how much play I have. I don't remember when I was under there last. I might be able to just pull it out. If not, I may have to pull this out, this tie rod end over here, and come out this direction. We'll see. I prefer to go here and take as little apart as possible. The easiest way to get it out would to be loosen these two bolts and have this drop forward and pull it right out straight. Might have to do that to put it in after all. I don't know. Like I mentioned, this is the first time I'm working on the Saturn CV axle, and I do have two CV axles. According to the online purchase, they say both of them fit this car on this side. One has a male end, one has a female end. So I bought both of them with the intent of sending one back. So once I pull this out, I'll see which one I need, and we'll take it from there. Okay, let me get started on this caliper, this wheel, and I'll show you what we have. And the reason I'm not videoing as I go, Johnny, my cameraman, isn't available to help me today. He's around, but he's doing things. And to video this, set up the camera and everything, I have to get this done. And for those of you that do videos, you know what it is to try to get this in focus and to keep it on target. So once I have this done, I'll be back. The other day I had to stop working on this. It started getting dark out. No matter how I tried, I couldn't get that axle out, no matter how I turned this wheel. I just put this brake back on just to hold it. Since the other day, 3 days has passed, and it's been in the 20s and below. Today is the warmest day so far. It's 30 degrees outside. It's going to drop to 20 in a few hours, and tomorrow there's snow. So I have no choice. I have to get moving. Looks like I'm going to have to remove these two nuts and remove this bolt. And I'm going to have to take the tie rod end off. I'm going to pull this ABS sensor off, because once I remove these bolts, and there's this little one over here, this should slide forward. Oh, and tie rod end has to come out. This should slide forward, and it would be too much stress on this, and the brake caliper I'll be hanging up here. Now this is something, if anybody's worked on these before and you just happen to be here, you know, checking things out, I haven't seen this setup before. On the bottom it looks like there's a bolt that should come out, and there's a nut. So I got to be careful taking this out. I don't want to destroy anything over here. And to get this out, I mean, on my old Chevy, I have a pickle fork that could go in here, but you don't want to damage the boot. On the old Chevy, sometimes you just would whack this and it would pop up. But I see a lot of aluminum over here and everything, and got to be real careful. So I have this soaked with some homemade penetrating fluid of acetone and brake fluid, 50-50 mix. That works pretty well for me. I'm going to soak it a couple more times, and then I'm going to use the electric impact gun to get these out. And once this is out and this is all goes forward, I should be able to pull this axle straight out. Should. We'll see what happens. Okay, so I just explained what I'm going to do. Once I get it done, I'll show you what it looks like, and then I'll get to the axle. Just want to show you what I ran into. These nuts here I soaked several times. I used this electric impact gun to get it off. If you don't have one, I believe you'll be able to get this out with a breaker bar. If you soak it with some penetrating fluid first, I don't think you'll have a problem. And this nut requires a 21mm socket. You have one here, these two. Over here, on the bottom of this, the nut that's on the bottom, it's still there. It took, where am I here? The nut that's on the bottom of this tie rod end requires an 18mm socket. And the little bolt that was up here that holds the bracket on for the ABS line, I came out here with a fully charged battery. It's so cold, the battery drained down. Anyway, this under here, I couldn't get this tie rod end out. I didn't want to use the pickle fork because I'm not changing it. So what I did, I got this big socket, jacked up. I put the nut back on. See if the camera's picking that up. Put the nut back on. I jacked the car up with the pressure on this nut and tapped it a few times. It wouldn't go. Then I gave it a few good shots with a ball peen hammer. Popped right up. So that's taken care of. Now it looks like I might have to take this lower ball joint off on the bottom, but I'm going to try to leave that on. Just remove these two nuts, remove the bolts, pull this forward from here if I can. I don't know if that's going to work. If I could pull this out and then turn the wheel, I might be able to get away with that. Otherwise, this lower ball joint has to come out. And I believe there was one. I'm sorry, I forgot where I left off before this camera went dead. I went in and warmed up a little myself. Let's see. Gave the for that. There was something here. Something I wanted to mention, and I can't think of what it was now. Once I loosen these up, I kept them on there to tap these bolts out without marring the threads. There was something I had to mention. There was something I wanted to mention. I can't think of what it was now. Once I get this off, I'll try to get this on a tripod, and getting that out back there now, it's pretty tight. I don't know how difficult that's going to be to pull out, but we'll see. Once you get these two bolts out, this will slide out. It took a little persuasion because of the rust that was in here. I put a little oil and just pulled on it and it came out. Now, here's where that axle goes in. If you pull on this axle, it's a good chance it's going to come apart. It's being replaced, so either way, that's going to be a little problem. I'm going to try to get back in there. I'm going to tap it a couple of times with a hammer, see if that loosens it up somewhat. And I'm going to get a pry bar. I could get a pry bar back in here. You got to be careful because there's your transmission and this is all aluminum. So you don't want to be cowboying back here. I might have to take this off also, this sway bar. I'm trying to remove as little as possible to get this out, but we'll see. Whatever has to be done, that's what we'll do. So let's see. I'm trying to look at a good angle to attack this at, but if I could get back in here, I don't know if I could get my hand right over here. If I could come in this way, maybe. You see, if you have a lift and you're working on a lift, this is a lot easier other than working on this ground and very little clearance. The next step is to get this out. Well, it's not happening today. The other day it was getting cold and started getting dark, so I wrapped up the tools. Then we had snow. This is a day later. We now have temperatures this morning was 7 degrees. I believe it's about 18 degrees right now. And I had difficulty getting that hub out. Everything came apart fairly easy, but I had the worst time trying to get that hub out. I tried a puller with a cable. That just had too much flex. I tried prying. There wasn't any room really to pry with. I even went online to try to get a few ideas. But for now, this is going to have to stay. I have to get it sooner or later. This coming week, I believe on Tuesday, the high is going to be 17. But cold or not, as soon as some of the snow melts and I could clean some of it up, I have to get back under there. I have those tools that I got out from, what was it over there? AutoZone, I believe it was. They have to go back within a time period. Otherwise, you end up buying them, and I don't need them on a permanent basis. But got to give this a couple of days, and I'll be back. So this is going to be a two-part series. Didn't plan for it to be that way. It's just this is taking its toll on me. And what I did over here, just to keep the water off everything, I have a piece of cardboard underneath, a piece of cardboard on top. Put the tire back to hold it, and this tire I had laying around just to keep it from blowing away. So that's it for now. Be sure to come back for part 2 and to see how I remove and install that new CV axle. And until next time, stay warm and be safe.